everybody. I'm doing something a little bit different tonight. So I know a lot of people like my Based AF shirt. And so there's a lot of things. If you're not a James Lindsay person, you should strive to get there because it'll explain a lot. You can listen to podcasts, you can on YouTube, new discourses. So you should strive to get there, but it's a lot. Not everybody's going to jump in and understand like Gnosticism and, but understanding like the woke, like what this is, where it's coming from is extremely important. And, so since we hosted the Marxification and Education workshop last summer in Crystal City, which has now become a book, which is extremely important if you have not gotten the book. And no, he's not paying me to do this. It's just really important to understand, queer theory, critical race theory, where all of this is coming from, because as I've been saying the last couple of times I've been speaking, is that this did not just come from an alien spaceship over COVID and miraculously emerge. So bear with me. I'm going to try and do something. So he has a new podcast. I was listening to it because he finally talks about Republicans. And no, this is not, my intention was not to do a Republican bashing session, but it will help understand everybody, hopefully. It's only 30 minutes and I'm going to do very little interrupting. I will chime in on a couple pieces, and it's very important in understanding how they work. And by they, I mean the traditional left works, why it's important for you to become educated as to what you're talking about. If you're awake, but afraid to speak out, what that does to people like myself who are considered rebels and will go up against anybody. And then the importance of why now has to be the time to decide and come forward. So with that, so like I said, his channel, New Discourses, it's also a podcast if you do Apple. And then that will then lead you to other, great podcasts like his. If you're in the car, if you're listening, he has bullet points if you don't want to listen to 3.5 hours. But guys, he has ones like the show, like what is SEL, like DEI, understanding like DEI training, which is where you'll understand that it's struggle sessions, is like you really have to understand this stuff, because as I also, you can't fight what you don't understand. Some people are watchers, some people are listeners. If I didn't rage read, I would do a podcast and talk to people instead of doing shows, but I would end up being I could not talk in an even tone about what's going on. You guys know that. So I wanted to do this to listen and explain how you're seeing it, especially if you're in the state of Virginia. So I have 2 screens. I need 3 screens. So let's pull this up and let's make sure the share screen works. Please, somebody, if the audio does not work, please let me know. So it should be ready to go. Okay. So this is New Discourses. And it's everything, like his newest one, like Maoism and American woke. He's a couple of really great ones he's come out with lately. Like the one, When to Stand Up is the one where he talks about G. Van Fleet and Loudon. So this one, I'm going to see. So this one is called How to Fight a Tyrannical Movement. Okay. And
hey everybody, it's James Lindsay. You're listening to New Discourses Bullets, in which I cover one topic relevant to woke Marxism and defeating it that I think we need to know. In this episode, I am going to talk about a model of people, 5 different types of people. Now, this isn't meant to be an exhaustive model. This isn't meant to be the definitive model of human beings or anything like that. But it is a model where the idea is that in some sense, especially where kind of a movement or collection of movements might be concerned, you can kind of identify 5 different types of people that are involved in it in one way or another, or 5 different relational modes to that movement. And that's what I want to talk about. To put my cards on the table, I am deriving this or adapting what I'm giving you from a talk I recently listened to from Charles Eisenstein. So you can look up his work if you're interested. I don't know, but he referenced in his remarks that he is into the philosopher Rene Girard, who is into kind of the way that, I guess, memes work in a sense. Not exactly that, but the word's escaping me. So you have to deal with my post-COVID verbal recall struggles for the moment and look up Rene Girard on your own. So anyway, I want to talk about this model of kind of 5 relational modes to what might be a movement. And just to put them out real quick, there are these 5 types, and I'll define them afterwards so I can just name them. There are ringleaders, there are strivers, there are normies, there are doubters, and there are rebels. Okay, so the ringleaders are the people who are actually driving the agenda, directing the agenda, probably making the agenda. They're the ones who are also pointing out who the enemies are. Those people think the wrong way. These people are problematic, etc. So the ringleaders are the people who are organizing the movement itself and that have operational goals, usually that benefit themselves. They are typically people, whether intentionally or organically, for good reasons or for bad, maybe it's just pettiness, who like to kind of be on top of the pile, and they like to get other people to reinforce that for them. So you can see how it would attract narcissists, sociopaths, and psychopaths, who are very frequently going to end up being ringleaders in movements. Now, the strivers are characterized by something of a lack of scruples, and kind of a trichotomy. People asked me a number of years ago why the Republican Party doesn't seem able to resist woke things. And we talked this out and kind of came up with a model that there were basically 3 types of politicians in the Republican Party: the feckless, the clueless, and the corrupt. So there are people who don't know what they're talking about. They're clueless. They don't know what's going on. There are people who have no courage whatsoever. They're feckless. And then there are people who are bought off or complicit, and they're corrupt. The strivers are the corrupt group. They are lacking in scruples. So what they're doing is reading the wind, and they're saying, hey, look, the ringleaders are creating an opportunity. They're building a world. I want to be on top in that world, and they pile on. So if the ringleaders say, hey, those people are problematic, they pile on and start saying, you're problematic. If the ringleaders say, hey, we're doing this, this is our movement, we're going to go, and they stick the flag in the ground, the strivers follow, because they're basically looking to maximize their utility. They're looking for the best deal, and they're going to take it. In the words of somebody who I actually heard say this at a conference one time, we were at an education conference, and we were talking about the woke and its infiltration into premier or prestigious private schools, kind of the elite tier private schools that tend to serve Ivy League universities. And this fellow said to me privately, you know, I agree with what you've said about the woke and its problems, but the problem is I think that basically they've won. And I don't really care what the world is going to be. I just want to make sure my kid comes out on top of it. That's the mentality in the striver class. Now, the thing is,
Any more screens? So this is where I'm going to jump in real quick. This is going to be a 2-sided coin, because this does apply to how the tyrannical movement on the left is working, especially when we get a little bit further on. Is that you've got, so when he talks about ringleaders, the ringleaders are on top. Those are going to be the people that don't have the power traditionally. Then we're going to flip the coin and see how that's manifesting itself in the Republican Party, when you have the feckless, who know, they just don't do anything about it. You have, the feckless, the clueless, which are the ones that, my stupid versus swamp swimming method. And then you have the corrupt, the ones who have been bought off, paid off, and they are part of the problem. And this is the first time he's ever mentioned the Republicans in this. And again, this is not a Republican bashing session because I am one, but as I will continue to say, is that until we acknowledge in education, it is both parties. Okay. You can see this in Senate bipartisan bills. You have the Clueless, you have the Feckless that know they're part of it. They want to come out on top. They don't care. And then you have the corrupt, the drivers. Okay. We have many, many, many feckless senators. Okay. We have many, many, and this is on both sides. Okay. I would say that there are 0 clueless left in the House and the Senate. I would say there are 0 clueless. I've tried, I would say Spurrier is probably the closest to clueless when it comes to education. I sat down and had during the Senate subed a meeting with him, and no matter how much information I gave him, he still charged ahead because he's got people like, what is his idiot's name? And, God, I can't think of it. Somebody, Charlottesville, Philip Hamilton running against him, Creed Eads. So he's got people like Creed Eads who've been in there forever saying, no, we need more trauma-informed care. This is good. I think that Spurrier could be the closest to a clueless, maybe. And then, which is why it's so important that he boots Lucas out, because she is not just feckless, she is corrupt. And then we have Merle come in. But anyway, I digress. But then on the right, you do have the mix of the clueless. And those are the people that I work with, educating them on what's going on in education. And again, like Amanda Chase. Because bipartisan unanimous bills in education should be a red flag, as I said. So to have somebody stand up who was clueless and say, no, I've learned more mental health is bad. Clueless then became educated and did something. Then you have the feckless, that would be Bryce Reeves, who I spent the entire time with, the same amount of time in the Senate on the same education transparency legislation. Why it's needed because of the mental health killing our children. Same bill, more mental health curriculum. He's feckless, or he is corrupt, combo of the two, because he then voted for more mental health curriculum. So you see what I'm saying? We have to look at both sides of the coin here. That's what this is going to be, is because that's going on. So you have to acknowledge that's what's going on in the Republican Party. Because there is an agenda. That's why we have the same education agenda. And I'm writing this out now, since Chuck Robb was governor in 1982, talking about our children's education and the economy, and all the way up until now. Nothing's changed. Just different RD, RDDD. Nothing's changed. Absolutely nothing. They've all had the same education agenda. So this is why this is so important. This next election is because our kids are out of time. So anyway, I digress again. So I just wanted to jump in and explain like why the Republican piece is important, because you need to start looking at your people and deciding if they're clueless. If they are, then have the conversations with them. Or I'll come along and have the conversations. I've had the conversation with the majority of them. And then they determine whether they are swamp swimming, as I call it, or feckless. And then you can easily determine if they are straight up corrupt, which is the people that are so proudly being like, I got endorsed by Governor Youngkin. Go and start event. Okay. Is when you have somebody running for Senate in your division, like Chesterfield, who puts out an ad and says, I'm running to support Glenn Youngkin's conservative agenda. Not the people of Chesterfield, Not, I'm running to protect the children. I'm running to get rid of personal property taxes. Literally, the only thing in the commercial is I'm running to protect Glenn Youngkin's conservative agenda. And the fact that there's so many parents here who still don't have parental rights, sending their kids into schools and don't realize what that conservative agenda is, baffles me. Like, why don't you just look at your kid and say, I don't care about you. I don't care about you. Because your kid's not going to wind up on top. I promise you that. So back to this. Okay, let's pull this back up.
To fulfill the agenda for themselves. The strivers do it. So the game for the ringleaders is to incentivize the strivers to become part of their program, to follow their agenda and to actualize their agenda, to so-called do the work, to actualize their agenda. In other words, in the language of kind of false realities or pseudo realities or second realities that we hear about with kind of Gnostic cults, the ringleaders create the false reality, the pseudo reality, and construct the incentive structure that strivers will pursue. Meanwhile, they construct the ideologies around that, or the false narratives, if you will, around that false reality, that second reality they've created, in order to mystify that third group, the normies. And so the ringleader's job with the strivers is to convince the strivers that going along with the agenda is the best deal they can possibly have. They might do this with carrots and sticks. For example, they might say, there's a big change coming. There's absolutely nothing you can do about it. So to try to do something different would be a bad deal. If you go along with us, well, that's going to be really good for you. If you resist us, it's going to be really bad for you. If you dither, we're going to have to get you out of the way. And so they create an incentive structure with carrots and sticks that convince strivers that their best deal with their lack of scruples is to follow this new agenda. That should feel very familiar with the ESG, Sustainable Development Goal kind of program. But you will also see it in reaction movements, where the reaction movement says something like, this is a disaster. There's only one way out. We all have to adopt this policy now, and everybody who's against us is a fake Republican, is a closet woke, or whatever happens to be the thing.
Okay, this is where I'm going to jump in again. If you saw on there, school choice, a reactionary movement. Okay, because I don't support school choice because I understand it. I've been called closet woke. I've been called a fake Republican. Which at this point, bravo, I'm glad to be a fake Republican, because Republican to me is like the word equity or racist. It means nothing, nothing. So a reactionary movement is a perfect example of Republicans. What just happened? Groups like Americans for Prosperity that come after me, they're part of the ringleaders because they have no power. So they buy and corrupt the feckless. Okay. Because I understand school choice as a reactionary movement. They surround you in war on 4 sides, not 3, or not on 4, on 3 sides. So you have nothing but to do but what? A reactionary panic to exit the only way that you think that you know how. And people like me who understand school choice and fight against Glenn Davis, because you have people like Glenn Davis who are corrupt. Then you have like Marie March, who, you know, I have never picked through her entire school choice, and, you know, coming up, working with Lance Allen and people and understanding school choice and what has to happen before you can have school choice is the government, especially on the right, and the Uniparty has to be broken apart. As I understand it, as a reactionary movement, and I fought hard against it, and I have never been more hated on about, what are you, a liberal? What are you? I mean, so this is what happens. This is how it happens on the right. When I'm trying to save you, save your children from the overarching goal of bringing all homeschooling and private schooling under the same umbrella, but I'm going to be attacked. I'm okay with that. And we're going to get to what kind of person I am, because we've covered 3. Okay. You've got the ringleaders. Okay. You've got the strivers. you've got the normies. Okay, those are the three not good ones. So just to clarify, like that's why I had school choice in there, and like ESG and SDG. Like this horrible climate thing is coming, which guys, I know that we've covered this before, but the overarching goal of social emotional learning is the SDGs. Go to the UNESCO Mahatma Gandhi Institute. They'll tell you. SEL is needed to stop dissonance in children as early as possible. So when the climate change comes, or the collective for the world, is that they're not going to have dissonance when they have to give away everything they have for the betterment of the world. So social emotional learning, they'll go look it up. Does shows on it. Mahatma Gandhi, UNESCO, SEL for the SDGs. It's right there. So I can't. So that's where that comes in, is a reactionary movement. The panic out for school choice is the best way to explain what he just said right there. So let's jump back in. Sorry if it looks a little bit ugly, but I need 3 screens here and not just 2.
That's irrelevant. They are low information. They're actually low engagement participants in this. They're the clueless category in terms of clueless, feckless, and corrupt. It's not necessarily that they're bad people, it's that they're not paying attention, maybe for good reasons and maybe for bad reasons. And maybe they don't want to pay attention. And so, what the ringleaders have to do is convince the normies that the deal that they're pushing, the agenda that they're pushing, is just the right thing to do. That it's not that bad, or in fact, that it's a positive good in some other way than the system that we have now. And since they're low information, they prey upon the fact that it's a low information situation and that they can easily mystify these people into supporting something. They aren't the people who move the agenda. They're the people who are hiding underneath the agenda to give it a consensus that it's the right thing to do. So the ringleader's goal with the normies is to mystify the normies into thinking that the agenda is the right thing to do. And they do that by generating false consensus, or even what the Marxists called false consciousness or mystification. They actually are doing information operations to mystify the normies into thinking that it is usually the morally right thing to do, although they might have, low resolution logic involved. But most normies are not that involved. They care more about their social environment. They care more about the boat that they're in not being rocked. And they're just kind of looking around, as Eisenstein had it. They're just kind of looking around and seeing, what do most people say? What do most people think? Okay, well, that's what we're doing. That's what we're going to go along with. It reminds me of this guy on a plane I talked to one time, where he said to me that, they're electrifying all cars, and he doesn't really think it's necessarily a great idea. But as he said, this is just what they're doing, and we just kind of have to go along with it. He's just seeing what he's not pushing it. He's not a striver. He's just accepting it without very much understanding of what's going on or why. So those 3 categories are the first 3 categories are the ones who are actually making the agenda go. The other 2, doubters and rebels, are against the agenda. The ringleaders set the agenda, and they're the ones putting out all of the narratives, etc., to incentivize the strivers, push the strivers, attract the strivers, activate the strivers. Those are your activists. Those are going to be the people who have low scruples and are caught up in it, and to mystify and maybe even attract some normies into the circuit to grow the cult around the ringleaders' personality cult or philosophical cult. Now, the 4th group is the doubters. These are the feckless people. These are the people that lack courage. And what I mean is they doubt the agenda, and maybe even they doubt the ringleaders, and they suspect the strivers, and maybe they're frustrated with the low information aspect of the normies. They think everybody else is stupid and that they've woken up, but they're not going to say anything because that would be terrible. So the job that the ringleaders have with regard to the doubters is to scare the crap out of them. They have to think all the time that they stand to lose virtually everything if they dare to speak up about what they think and what they know. They normally do this by occasionally picking a doubter whose doubts became known and absolutely crushing them. Cancel culture, for example. Or by making examples out of rebels who truly stand up. And so The goal with the doubters is to make sure that they never voice their doubts. And the reason is because the rebels, who are relatively small in number, much like the ringleaders are relatively small in number, the rebels are actually at tremendous risk by speaking up, by standing up and fighting back, because that's obviously what the rebels are. They're the people fighting back. They often maybe lack in social graces or better sense or something like this. But the rebels are the ones who are at the highest risk. And if they're relatively small in number, they're easy to crush, they're easy to stop, they're easy to ignore, and they're easy to make examples of. And those examples come back to the doubters. So it turns out that the first person in a movement who stands up and says no, or against a movement to stand up and say no, has a lot of courage, but he's not the most courageous person in the room. The most courageous person is the person who stands up second. So the first most courageous person is the second person who stands up. The second most courageous.
Okay, so sorry, this is going to get ugly again. This is what is so important and why I'm doing this, okay? I am obviously a rebel. I will walk through the fires of hell, face to face with the devil, and give 0 forks. Why? Because and what that means, so being based, you can't, as like think like boxing, like you get based. I can't be knocked down from the right or the left. And I got it coming at both sides. I was born this way. So am I the most courageous? No, I was made this way. Rebels will be rebels. The most courageous people are the doubters. Okay. They are the ones who know it's wrong. They suspect it's wrong. They doubt, the ringleaders they know are bad. The agenda's bad. They not recognize the normies aren't going to do anything. The strivers they think are disgusting, and they're awake and they're annoyed because no one else is awake, but they're not doing anything. Okay. The few in number, those of us that were born to do this, we are at a place in time for these children. We need the courageous doubters to become and have the courage to step up, because there's very few of us, and I've said this from the beginning, in the state of Virginia, if we had 30 to 40, not 3 to 4 across the state we're doing this, and I'm not saying doing it like I do, like this, but at school board meetings, like I've got one in Powhatan. She's the bomb. She doesn't care. She will go up, is that if I had 1 to 2 that were willing to go toe to toe and have the education and the wherewithal to, when I give you information, like this mom in Powhatan, she went and sought it and looked for it and found it and dug and understood. I did not have to explain hardly anything to her. That's when somebody who, I think that she went like straight from like Clueless to Rebel in like days. And that's like, so if you're a doubter, which means it's wrong, you're annoyed, not enough people are awake on it, but you're not doing anything. I'm not just saying me, I'll fight this by myself or with the few of us till the bitter end by myself, because I sleep well at night, because I'm doing, instead of being stressed and having anxiety all the time, worrying how this is going to turn out. I sleep amazing at night because I'm doing everything in my power. And this is another thing, is that if you're constantly stressed out about how this is going to end up, you know how you relieve that stress and that tension? You stand up. You be that voice for your children, for your grandchildren, for your niece, for your neighbor, whoever. You be that person, because you do it once. I promise you, second time, third time, and then the more you get educated and you can anytime, anywhere with anybody who comes at you, and you can shut down Glenn Davis, Ty Turner, whoever comes after you, okay? The left, Go Gatsby. I can shut Becky Pringle down if she were to call me right now. I could shut Miguel Cardona, Joe Biden, anybody, because knowledge is power. And I got this way in 16 months. Okay, I was a clueless mom August of last year. You spend your time reading material. You can't just expect it, because I can promise you this, nobody in the government is coming to save us or these kids. So that's that part.
Person is the first person who stands up, or maybe the third, because the ringleaders operate with the rebels through an iron fist. Literally, in Mao's cult, the rebels were considered enemies of the state, enemies of the people, and the people were mobilized in literal hate campaigns, literally teaching them to be viscerally hated. The Soviets did the same thing with the kulaks. The Nazis did the same thing with the Jews. They are literally hated, although Jews technically weren't exactly rebels in that story. I don't want to confuse things with these, but you get the idea of this relentless attacking and scapegoating. But the goal is, like I said, to crush the rebels and to keep the doubters silent, because if the doubters were to start speaking up, every single doubter who starts speaking up, every single person who says, I admire what you do, but I could never stand up and say it myself, if they started saying it, the liability pool for the rebels gets more diffused. In other words, it gets every single doubter who speaks up, makes it safer for every rebel and every other possible doubter to stand up. This is why cowardice and courage are both contagious. So the thing is with doubters is that they doubt the agenda. They often doubt the ringleaders. They also sometimes will start to suspect the strivers, but they don't dare call them out because they have no courage. And we hear that there's this crisis of courage, blah, blah, blah. They're the silent majority. And if they would stop being silent, we would have a majority against the agenda. A lot of these agendas are actually extraordinarily unpopular. There are good estimates suggesting that 90% of the population is not in favor of most of the woke stuff and would not go as far as the full blast sustainability agenda if they understood it, if they knew what it was. The strivers are profiting off of it, and the ringleaders are making sure they will and making it be pushed. What we need then are doubters who are willing to speak up, which turns them into rebels. And what we need, in other words, they've been infused with courage. And we need normies who've been infused with information so that they literally can pick a side. Just pick a side. I would say that they should join the rebellion, and I think most of them will. That's why it's called the silent majority.
And guys, just real quick, that's where I'll jump in, and that's where we're at, especially with the Republican Party, is it is your time. Like I tell them, the time to choose. There's no more fence riding. The people that are uncomfortable in office, who can rage on what gun rights are, but when it comes to things like live birth abortion, or physician assisted suicide, or something like, I don't know, parental rights being revoked from millions of parents in a transgender policy, not one Republican could stand up with, and all of them parents, is that the fence riding is over. You're going to choose which side you're on, because we are at that point with these children in this cultural revolution in the midst of a constitutional war, because that's what's going on. Okay. I've done 8 shows. Every time I speak, I talk about Mao, cultural revolution, hypersexualization of children, their splitting of the family apart with what's going on in the schools, the education that you don't know about. Guys, this is a cultural revolution in the midst of a constitutional war, because we have Republicans who don't know the law, who don't follow the law, who would think the law, the Constitution, is a mythical unicorn. Okay. So there is the time to choose, and it is now, because our children do not have another Senate race. Our children don't even have time for another governor to come in. It is going to take the doubters standing up with the rebels. It is going to become you becoming so firm that you can look and say, this is grooming. You are criminals. Governor Youngkin, why haven't you changed the model policy, 14th Amendment due process, raped from every parent across this state, Governor Youngkin? That's the problem we're having within the Republican Party. So you're either clueless or you're feckless or you're corrupt. Because I know that no parent in the Republican Party is that clueless to think that he actually did change the policy. So then you become feckless. And who's going to pay for it in the end? Your children. So the time to choose is now.
The ringleaders need the strivers to do everything, and so they become a very special group, just like the rebels are a very special group. But the rebels need support because life is made to suck for them. They're canceled, they're excluded, they're made examples of, they're attacked, etc., etc. And since they are in that circumstance, they need primarily doubters because the normies aren't paying attention, the strivers aren't going to do it, and the ringleaders certainly are not going to do it. The only group in this that could do this is the doubters. So the doubters come up and whisper their moral support. I could never stand up with you. Let me tell you, somebody who hears that a lot. I don't like hearing it. And I've talked to hundreds of other people who are standing up, and I can't find one of them that likes hearing it. We're glad you secretly support us, but it doesn't help us at all. In fact, it keeps our lives very dangerous. And so it would be much better if you actually spoke up. And the longer you wait, the worse it gets. So you should speak up now, because the more people who start speaking up now, the safer it gets for everybody speaking up, and we actually can win. If you're too scared to speak up, so here's a type of doubter that's never going to wake up, but does want to do something, doing other forms of support. Moral support's not worth a whole lot. I'm just going to tell you. Material support, whether it's time or whether it's financial, is helpful. It's not as good as standing up. I would rather you keep every cent and open your mouth than give money to people who are opening their mouths. But if that's all you got, rebels have got to wake up doubters to support them or to join them, one or the other. If all you can be convinced to do is throw a few bucks this way or that as quietly and invisibly as possible, bless you for that. At least it's something, but I hope you'll open your mouth. So what are the rebels? How do we fight back against the woke? Well, operationally, here's what the people who are actually rebelling are trying to do. Number one, they're trying to discredit the ringleaders and often the strivers. They're trying to reveal that they have an agenda, that they are not operating in the benefit of most of the people that they have mystified, that they're not selling a good deal. As a matter of fact, that they're benefiting themselves. So they're working to discredit and expose the ringleaders. This is very important because
guys, this is very important too, what he's saying. And I'm not sitting here saying like patting myself on the back, but I work very hard as a researcher to uncover this stuff that I tell you. I don't make it up. I'm a journalist. I'm a researcher. I do not make this stuff up. Okay. So if you discount what I say, shame on you. And then go check behind. I'll tell you where I found it and how I found it. Or you can call me. Is that so? What he said, we need your time. We do absolutely need your time. $5. We don't take money, guys, because taking money from big companies, that's how conservative think tanks became the problem in Virginia, is by funding. Okay. We went through this with FreedomWorks. You can talk about trans, CRT, the books. You can't talk about SEL, and you can't, and that's what got my brain turning, and I figured out why. Okay, guys. So, is that we work very hard to give you the knowledge so that you can have the power to stop being a doubter and to become a rebel, if you will. Like, I wish there was a better, I am a rebel, but a nonconformist. How about that? Because I'm a high defiant nonconformist. Well, not everybody is high defiant, but you can become a nonconformist, which is refusing to conform to what you know in your heart and in your soul is wrong. because there's people like me. I will educate you so that you can become based, so that when you go to the school board meeting, you can walk up to them and say, if you're going to force equity on them, since you're all white, you need to step down and walk away from the podium like this and never think twice, because you're so based in what you know and how you feel that you become but we have to have your help. And then the doubters, you can figure out whether the normies are going to ever do anything besides straddle the fence. So it's them against us. And when I say them against us, I mean both parties against us. Because the time to stand is now. And when I say now, I cannot emphasize it to you enough. We are teetering on the abyss like this. And if you are in the Republican Party, I'll take James off for this 1 second. If you are in the Republican Party and you are a parent and you are not enraged at what you were promised, and we are here 15, 16 months post day one, not even what I've exposed to you about why it's never going to be delivered and what the actual intent, because I've done it 100 times. Even if the only thing that you know is what you were promised has not been delivered, okay? Because he doesn't need a Senate to do any of it. Okay, I'm so tired of that. If you're not enraged and you're still applauding, like I see people like, best governor, we're so are people that disillusioned? And then I see the parents supporting the establishment candidates, whether it's delegate or in the Senate, who you send your kid into the school with, and now you want to prop up a senator or a delegate that's part of the establishment? Like Emily Brewer and Hermie Sadler, okay? Emily Brewer is on this thing called the Virginia Council of Youth, VCOY. You want to talk about one of the most disgusting things being done to our children that you probably don't know about? Yeah, that's a Republican heading that. Have fun down that road. Okay. Glenn Sturdivant. Nobody cares in Chesterfield. Communities and schools, which is SEL and DEI all day, counseling all day long. There's 11 schools within our schools in Chesterfield. 10,000 children getting this. Their parents probably don't know about it. He was on the Richmond City School Board, brought it in. They don't care. We're set in our ways, and he's better than Amanda Chase because how dare her be a ballsy female? What? Are you kidding me? Anybody running for a Senate seat that has the balls to go on a commercial and say that they need to be elected to protect Glenn Youngkin's conservative agenda, period, dot, that's the end. Doesn't mention the community that's electing him. It astonishes me. And I wish that one conservative woman in Chesterfield County would grow a pair and have this discussion with me. It's the same people. When you have Carrie Coyner, who created the Equity Committee with James Lane, Northam's James Lane in Chesterfield, when you have Carrie Coyner endorsing Glenn Sturdivant and you're still pro Glenn Sturdivant, you are so checked out and your allegiance to the GOP is so dangerous that I hope I don't ever see you, because you've sold your own children down a road of hell that you will pay for the rest of your life. You've looked at them and you said, I don't care how much porn is exposed to you in school. I don't care if you're raped in a bathroom, because we have a governor that won't protect our children. That's what you're doing. For what? For what? And this is when I get really pissed. And the fact that I spend more time trying to fix the party that's I'm supposed to be on the side of than going after the actual lunatics doing the damage. So when I talk about the problem is both parties, it's not just the history of it. It's the fact that all day long, Republicans are like, oh, the left is so loony. They're so loony. They're so loony. They're so radical. They're so crazy. Like this new thing that Jason Miyares and Youngkin have, this note piece of paper. I know everybody's seen it. Where who knows where the thing came from, but it's got, oh, these radical left, they've got, this note about Youngkin and Miyares and they're this and that and the other. And I'm like, a sane Republican could have written that. Who knows where that came from? But yeah, and they're like, and it's something like, the loony left is mad at us because we put the victims ahead of the criminals. I'm like, and people are like, you guys are the best. Thank you for doing that. And I'm like, when did you do that? When? Because we still don't have that child protection, that big Jason Miyares was supposed to start because Virginia is one of the dirtiest CPS in the whole nation. Still don't have that. When did you put the victim ahead of the criminal? I'm still not saying it. Anybody else? And people are like, you're so amazing. You're the best ever. I can't wait for you to be president. Oh my God. Okay. Oh my God. So this is when I get really is that if you're a Republican and you're still Team Youngkin, you are feckless. Because at this point, if you're still watching this show or you're not clueless. If people that want to make excuses for him all day long, well, what do you expect? He needs the majority. No, he doesn't. No, he doesn't. SEL, guess what? If he wanted to, the law's written to hand it to the Department of Education. He could change it. He could make it not be transformative, systemic, embedded SEL because the law is not written that way. The VDOE did it. Transgender policy. Guess what? Doesn't say anything about bathrooms. Doesn't say anything about removal of parental rights. It's a crappy law that they wrote and they handed it to the VDOE. And just like a school board policy, it could be changed at any time. So none of this stuff requires what do you expect him to be? Somebody said, what do you expect him to be? The iron law. Yeah. When it comes to things like 14th Amendment due process, yes, that would just require an executive order that you can't remove parental rights. And that has the force of law. He has this great ability to do things called executive orders that have the force of law, not a guidance on divisive ideologies. Okay. VMI, equity is dead at one tiny university. And then he's on the news talking about, yeah, equity is dead. And I'm watching going, Kayleigh McEnany, where's your fax binder? How are you going to go on Fox News and say equity is dead in Virginia when you did it at one university? Drive me bonkers.
This shifts the dynamics, especially within the strivers to a degree, as we'll talk about in a second, the normies and the doubters. When doubters become convinced that this is a big ripoff, more of them will get courage to speak up. When normies become awake to it, many of them will start to doubt. When strivers are convinced it's a bad deal that the ringleaders are offering, they'll defect. And we want them to defect. So the second thing that the rebels should be trying to do, this is your strategy. Rebels, people who are fighting the system with a capital S, should always be trying to discredit the ringleaders, expose them, explain their manipulations, show what's going on, discredit the ringleaders, discredit the cravenness of and the lack of scruples maybe of the strivers. But primarily the goal is to convince the strivers that they're operating in a bad deal, that the ringleaders are going to betray most of them, or that what they're building is not actually that good of a thing, and that they actually had a better deal available to them by being, people without scruples in the previous system, that the new system is actually a fraud, and that most of them are going to get ripped off by it. Because the goal really is to get a few of them to defect, at which point, I should say, in which case you've started a chain of dominoes. Third, people that are fighting this should be working to wake up and demystify the normies. In other words, it is to get the normies to engage with the information and then to start to absorb the information so they can understand what's actually going on. This is a lot of what happens in these kinds of podcasts, these shows. This is what Tucker Carlson was so important for. It wasn't that he was saying the truth and giving a nice palliative experience to people who are in the know. It was that he was on a gigantic cable platform that was reaching normies, mostly boomers, and convincing them that something is badly wrong in this country, at which point many of them start showing up to other things. They, in the sense, become doubters. The people showing up to public talks, for the most part, the people supporting podcasts like this one, for the most part, are already doubters or rebels. So what they need to be is emboldened. They're lacking courage. They need to be encouraged. And then finally, the rebels actually need to, as much as possible, support one another, recruit help, but also they have another very important function, which is to make sure that potential new ringleaders don't emerge from their ranks and jerk us into a pit, because that happens all the time.
Which is why we have endorsed people. There's a reason why we have minimal endorsements. And the people like Matt Strickland and Lance Allen, and God bless, I still, one day, there's no way that Bryce Reeves won. I'll just say that. But is that if we have to do something different, okay? One, the expectation that politicians need to be in those seats. I think that we've squashed that. But that's why is that we have to do something different. We have to embolden a different type of people to come forward. We have to get rid of you have to dress in a suit and you have to walk around we don't want politicians anymore, guys. If there's anything that we've learned, especially attorneys, I'm so tired of attorneys running saying, I'm an attorney. I'm a constitutional attorney. Really? Why haven't you talked about the 14th Amendment or due process? I mean, like, why? Because it would go against the governor? But I don't want any more attorneys. Like, can we go back to the days where, like, you had to be in this, like, the service? I don't know. Because then you are ready to go into a theater of war as a warrior and a soldier, versus attorneys who are always trying to finagle their way out or finagle their way in. And we have to get over the idea that the plain old parent who's educated can do something too. Like, we are all human, and we all, as Americans, have a right to be there just as much as the seasoned corrupt politician.
Very important things, but this is a general strategy. One more time real quick. Discredit the ringleaders by exposing them, convince strivers that they have a bad deal at hand, even if that includes by exposing them for their cravenness. Wake up and demystify normies, embolden doubters to take action and support one another, recruit help, and keep new ringleader tangential reactionary movements from emerging from the rebellion ranks. Ringleaders will not like when the rebellion starts to happen, as you can tell. And their primary tools we recently covered here on this podcast is DARVO, deny, attack, and reverse the roles of victim and offender.
Hold on. We gotta talk about DARVO, and because this is really important. So Ray said getting people to listen is the biggest problem. Correct. Not only getting them to listen, but when they speak out or they finally get the courage and then they are attacked and shut back down. And that's why, let me pull it up. That's why understanding DARVO is so important. I understand it, but I've always understood it as gaslighting. Okay. DARVO is the same thing, which he's going to talk about. I call it gaslighting. It's deny. They're going to deny it's happening. They're going to attack you. They're going to reverse it. And then they're going to take you as the victim and they're going to make you the offender. So just real quick. I hate this. I need 3 screens. Never thought I would say that.
The good guys and the rebels become the ringleaders, right? It works because it's actually easy to paint rebels as ringleaders. They're out there doing things like emboldening doubters. They're out there demystifying normies, which they'll say is mystifying normies or feeding you conspiracy theories. See? They're conspiracy theorists, teaching people conspiracy theories. So we have to suppress misinformation so the normies don't wake up. That's what's going on with that. And so it's easy to paint the rebels as ringleaders and doubters as actually closeted inverse strivers who are striving only in secret through shadowy means like giving money and support and sharing articles quietly with whatever. It's actually easier than that to convince the kind of sleepy normies that that the rebels are actually the real ringleaders. They're the real problem because there are actually real reactionaries among them.
I want to talk about Darvo really quick. Okay. So think about it this way. The books. Okay. Currently, right now, Roald Dahl, the James Bond books, when we talk about book banning, okay, like To Kill a Mockingbird, Huck Finn, but currently they're rewriting James Bond. The Roald Dahl books have been rewritten. Okay. That is censorship and book banning. Okay. So if you were to know that they're doing that currently, that's okay. But porn in our schools to our children is that they're going to deny, then they're going to what? Attack you and say, but you are censoring books, you're book banning, you're because my parental rights, which is the new thing, my parental rights is if I want my children to be exposed to this. I said, okay, then you're a criminal. Okay, you're a criminal. If you're admitting that you want your parental rights are to have porn in schools for your kids, you're a criminal. But is that they were, reverse. And this, I see it happen all the time. But so Darvo, look it up. Keep a meme, create your own. And this on Twitter happens all the time. Day-long conversations with a loony in Fairfax, like back and forth about, you don't know. This is what you're doing. You have no idea what you're talking about. You're not a teacher. Are you in a classroom? Like I was in it, and then I was like, mute. Like they're going to think they won. Guess what? I don't care. I don't have time. So now, Darvo, just post the meme, like Darvo. Boop. Mute the conversation. Like you can't win with these people. They're going to mine all day long by Darvo. Gaslighting is how I traditionally knew it. And that's what's really important to know. And once you know what they're doing, let's see. How do you say? I'm going to take a clip of that piece. We all have a right to be there just as much as the seasoned corrupt politician. Correct. Like the whole idea, like I've been clean for 15 years, but how many drug addicts or alcoholics do you think are currently seated? We're all human. We all have mistakes. I just admit mine and I live it in the light. My secrets aren't in the dark because that's where they fester. And so if I ran for office and they were to attack me because I'm a recovering addict, everything is about me is forward. You can drug test me every day we walk into the Senate. Can we do that to you? Can I give you a breathalyzer every day? We're all human, and what doesn't live in the light festers in the dark. And all these people that you can walk in with the most expensive Brooks Brothers suit that you want. You're still a dressed up dumpster trash can. Still trash can. You can dress it up, shine it, make it as pretty as you want. Still trash can. But so Darvo is something everybody needs to understand what's going on. Because when you become based, you know what you know what's right and wrong, but they are very good at this. You'll start to question if what you're saying, God, do these kids really have a right to these books? Like they're very skilled in this. Have you ever been in a relationship, a gaslighting, abusive, narcissistic relationship? I have. I was in one for 10 years. They will tell you that it's one of those, I'm not doing that, you're doing it. And you're like, I didn't do that, you did it. 10 years I did that. It makes you crazy. It makes you crazy. And then you have no idea what reality is anymore. You don't know. Do these kids really get, are we really hurting them by not letting them just, like, that's how it happens. And that's what they want. So the more you engage with them in these conversations, you cannot talk somebody out of a cult. She said, yeah, that's a James Lindsay thing. I had never, he actually has a whole segment on it on Darvo. And it's like 10 minutes. It's one of his bullets. And he explains it really well. Like he explains it through critical race theory, through transgender, is that, well, why are you attacking trans people? What are you, a transphobe? You're just going to have kids go kill themselves. Okay. Because your children are no longer the victim. Okay. The children. Okay. Now you're now the offender because your beliefs are going to make children go kill themselves. It's like this. And then you're going, are they really? So the second that somebody starts this with you, shut it down. You cannot talk these people out of a cult. Cannot. Not possible. Never going to happen. Never going to happen. So keep a little Darvo meme. Make your own. You can Google it, hit images, and there's about 1 billion. There's a lot of Darvos where they LGBTQ Darvo. Like they literally flip the script. They've Darvoed the Darvo. So just beware of that. But post it, mute the conversation if it attack. But the thing is that so the end of that was, it's disappointing when they refuse to believe you. It is. But if you're talking to an insane person, think of it this way. It's like talking to somebody with schizophrenia and being upset, or somebody with Alzheimer's and being upset the next day when they don't remember your name or anything that you said to them. You can't change their chemical makeup, what's been cognitively embedded in their brain, Swiss cheese holes in it. You can't change that. I get disappointed when I talk to logical people who are concerned. I wouldn't exactly call them, I would call them more of normies than, and then they're like, I get everything you're saying, but I really don't believe that, like, the coctopus and that, all of these conservative think tanks are a part of it. Well, why aren't they talking about, if they're going to be involved in education, why aren't they talking about this? That's when I get disappointed. I don't get disappointed when I can't talk a lunatic off a ledge. I get mad. And then that's when it's time for me to, from now on, I'm going to take Darvo. Boop. Because if you engage in these conversations too long, trust me, I've had it happen to me. You're mad. You've wasted your time. You've done nothing. You've another coach arrested today for rape. Another coach, yeah. I don't have it on me, but posted today in Chester Issues. It came out about a teacher with images of a teacher in Chesterfield County. I think it was at Metallica. The text that came out between a female teacher and he just graduated a child because he just graduated. So somebody's son talking about my husband is home. And then throughout this thread, oh yeah, it happened here too at this school, teachers chiming in. The thread baffled me because we have 63,000 children, this much knowledge about what's going on in this county, and 2 and 3 people show up at school board meetings here. But everybody seems to know how many pedophile teachers are at each middle element. Oh, happened at Carver. Oh, it's happening over here. Heard about that happening at this middle school. Oh, yep, heard about that happening at this elementary school. I'm going, like, baffled. You have children there. You're acknowledging. And then the teachers were like, yeah, you should hear what I heard in the lunchroom the other day. And I'm like, these are children. So yes, the rape, the abuse, the teachers being arrested for, but imagine this. Okay, flip the script. They have the rights, right? But they have none of the responsibilities. They want parental rights. They have them in loco parentis. But when children are abused in school, when teachers rape them, groom them, there's no responsibility. That's like the antithesis of what freedom is in this nation. You have rights, but you have responsibilities. You don't get rights without responsibilities. So, and it is a massive national problem. And then refusing to acknowledge it as it is, and school boards covering it up because that's not just Loudon. It's everywhere. Like, I would challenge you to like Google your public school system and then click news and see what the news has covered. I did it during the last school board meeting and found out like they were found by the feds non-compliant in like 18 different data areas. There was like a gun at Elsie Bird, a knife fight, another gun the same day that a gun with loaded gun at a middle school that like 2 teachers had physically assaulted 6 children in Chester early childhood education. It is a ramp. And then they look at you at the school board meetings like, how dare you bring that up at a public meeting? But guys, this is that. She said, and all around, just in the last 3 years. Yeah. This is not normal. And so when things are not normal and they stop and life is no longer making sense, you got to figure out why, and you have to get involved because like he said, it's going to get worse before it gets better. It's going to get worse if we don't step up before it gets better. And the quicker and the more people that step up, and the faster you step up, because 1, 2 of us doing this, we'll do it till we die. I don't know if we can do it alone and save these kids. But yeah, it's going to get worse if people don't. I mean, I have like 8 pairs of steel balls. If anybody wants one,
courage and actual moral fiber who are actually genuinely interested in a good, healthy society rather than their own advantage that speak up, the harder it is for reactionaries to get traction in the rebellion space. On the other hand, when nobody's willing to say anything, it's only a handful of types of people, the kind of genuinely rebellious and the kind of people who are actual reactionaries who want to take us into their tyranny instead, who are going to speak up. So you don't want to have a vacuum of reasonable voices. If you're a reasonable voice and you're in the doubters, you need to start speaking up. We have to be able to box.
I will say that too. I am not a reasonable voice. So if you want to get involved, and whether it be writing or, is that I am not the best example of a reasonable voice. I'm somebody that you want to take into war. Is that you can be a rebel and you don't have to be, it doesn't have to be that word like a rebel. Like you can be vive la resistance, like the resistance, but you don't have to be my level because I don't like, I'm not saying that like I'm what anybody should strive to be because, but that's me. And I think that everybody needs me, just like everybody has a position in the rebellion. We don't need a whole bunch of angry, like, and I say angry, I'm passionate. I am angry sometimes, but most of what people say is passion because I understand the damage that's being done. But yeah, I mean, reasonable voices
out the reaction, not just because we don't want the reaction, which we shouldn't and don't, but also because The problem is that the ringleaders are going to use the reactionaries as proof that what the whole thing is actually this huge reactionary movement into a different ringleader pit that's actually fascism, is usually the word we hear. So meanwhile, what's going on is the reactionaries that are within the rebels are actually counter ringleaders. They are ringleaders in a counter operation. Their goal isn't to actually stop the transformation of society, it is to transform society their way. So their goal becomes to grow their ranks and eventually entice the strivers into deciding that the true better deal lies with them instead of with the current ringleaders. And this is a big problem because if they start to get effective and powerful, they might. The strivers.
Okay, so what he's talking about is like rebels that are rebels, but then they get power and then they become the ringleaders. And so that's not what we're talking about here. That would be, I would at least, because there are not enough rebels on the right for that to even matter. So we're talking about like the left. So that's when the coin's going to flip, is that you've got, the reactionaries, the Trans-Tifa is a great example of this, is they will align with anything that's going to up. Like, they burnt down the monument, they tore them down, and then what do? Because their overall goal is to change society. Like, so what do? They went to the schools and they started. So is that the rebels getting too much power is also, but that would be, I don't want any power. I promise you that much.
Are not ideologically committed to the thing, whether it's woke or whatever, that they're pushing. So when a big, say, post-liberal reaction comes along and it looks like they're going to be able to make giant business deals, they'll defect. The strivers are just going to go where their best opportunity is. They don't care what the system is. They just want their kids on top of it. So they don't care if they're pushing woke because that's where it looks like the wind is blowing. They don't care if they're pushing Hitler because that's where it looks like the wind is blowing. They don't care if they're supporting Mussolini or Franco or today's reactionary right movements if they were to get enough momentum and power using the woke thing. Once the woke starts to look like a liability and a bad deal, you're going to see defection of strivers into other programs. And so reactionaries as counter ringleaders are not really rebels. They're not rebelling against the system. They're trying to capitalize off of it for themselves and become the new ringleaders. Okay.
So I would say that is where the problem with conservative think tanks has come. Because being a researcher, when I'm reading what was being talked about by these groups 20 years ago, they're not talking about it anymore. So I would say that they were once rebels and they got too much power and they then became the new ringleaders for the new conservative agenda, is what I'm seeing. And that's through reading and research.
So instead of working to convince people that the ringleaders deal is bad and that they are mystifying the normies, they're going to mystify the normies in a different direction and attract the strivers to themselves. So this is the issue, right? Because strivers don't care which system they're in, and reactionaries can take advantage. If I were to draw this out on like a spectrum, ringleaders on the one end, rebels on the other, as a line with 5 dots. Here are the ringleaders. Then we move right by 1 spot, maybe. Here are the strivers, right by 1 spot. Here are the normies, right by 1 spot. Here are the doubters, and we go right again. And here are the rebels. The thing is that the rebels would have to be split into 2 pieces like a V. One of those is actually true rebels, and one of those is reactionaries. And that there's actually 2 dots in the strivers, sort of, because there's the strivers going this way and there's the strivers that are willing to go that way or will lean that way. So you end up having this loop where the strivers can be siphoned off and flip the entire thing around. And by the way, this is why horseshoe theory is true. The reactionaries are actually ringleaders, and it doesn't matter if it's right wing, left wing, right wing. It doesn't matter how you orient that. The 2 pieces are the same. That's why the ends seem to touch. But the fact of the matter is that the people who are truly rebelling against the tyranny are against both of those. So I don't know if you can picture what I described in my head, but I hope you can. But what it means is that the rebels not only have that strategy that I told you, they also have to fight a 2-front war against the ringleaders and the strivers and on the other side.
I've actually never listened to the last few minutes of this, but what I said before about I am fighting both fronts, both sides. I'm not just fighting one. I'm not just fighting the left. Okay, because that's total bullshit. If you're not fighting both sides, you're not a true rebel. You're not going to affect any change because you're in the middle.
Side and the ringleaders and the strivers coming up as a usurping reaction, what the Chinese call the usurping sun energy, the counter ringleaders. So on top of their regular operations, which is to discredit the ringleaders and expose them, to convince strivers that they're operating in a bad deal, which is actually the most important part of counter operations, is to convince the strivers, to convince CEOs, to convince politicians that when this goes bad, it's going to go real bad for you. And if you get out ahead of that, it's not going to go as bad for you, but it's going to go real bad for the people who waited too long. So you should probably bail out sooner rather than later. And by the way, the system before was getting you really rich. These promises that the ringleaders sold are false. That's the kind of thing that strivers have to be convinced of. And then you offer them golden bridges out. So hopefully that they become strivers in a open and free system as opposed to some new tyrannical system that the ringleaders have come up with. So we discredit the ringleaders. We convince the strivers they're operating in a bad deal and would be better.
So James starts to okay. So there are a lot of people grifting off of woke. Grifting means, especially in Virginia, writing books. Fairfax. Think about it. Grifting, talking about the woke only, that the Republicans have no part of it. Holding parental rights forums. And then writing woke books. And then having published in USA Today the day after their parental rights forum that Glenn Youngkin would make an amazing president. And they hope that he runs. That kind of stuff. So when we talk about counter opposition, those are the people. Those are the ones that have been bought off to become relevant because that's what's important to them. Okay. The boat becomes more important than rocking the boat. And so I'm just going to go to the end, which is...
Okay, so it's going to go bad for the vast majority of you. You need to start making the revolution. If they get their power, what you can dedicate to helping stop this thing from happening. Strivers, you need to actually understand and realize, young people, you're the Red Guard. You're a striver, even if you don't know you are. You're a moral zealot striving to succeed in this new moral, false morality that the ringleaders, the woke ringleaders have created, for example. You need to realize your deal is bad. They're going to put you in the gulag first. They're going to get rid of you. They don't need destabilizing entities, which they've turned you into on the other side of the revolution. If they get their power, you're done. You're done. You're locked in your apartment. You have no social credit, whatever it happens to be. Or historically, you get sent out to the fields. Strivers in business, your business is either going to become one of the handful of monopolies or you're going to be crushed. You're going to be bought out. You're going to be, if you're not completely compliant, completely towing the line, completely without any freedom or latitude, you're going to get ejected. This is where this system goes. This is a bad deal for you, except for a very small percentage of you who get welcomed into the ringleader group. You have a bad deal in front of you. If you're in the airline industry, the travel industry, the shipping industry, you're being asked to, your fossil fuels industry, you're being asked to kill your own industry for the ringleaders. Where do you think you end up? Well, I'll tell you, because the people pushing the current tyranny are Hegelian, and the reactionaries tend to be Hegelian too. So your choices aren't that good with either one of them. And the deal is that Hegel said history uses people and then discards them. So when you're done being useful, just like the woke Red Guard, you're...
So just real quick. So this is going to be white people who align with Black Lives Matter. So just think of it like that. Because at the end of the day, you can support them all day long. And like people like Kimberly Crenshaw and Ibram X. Kendi, you can be a white teacher pushing critical race theory. But at the end of the day, if these people ever came to actually have power, you're still white. Because that's how radical these people are. And this happened, you know, the people that were not Aryan who supported Hitler, they were the first people that Hitler got rid of. Okay, is what you need to understand. You can support them all day long so that you end up on top, but if these lunatics ever actually if we ever actually reach the pinnacle that we are approaching, because nobody will acknowledge what's actually going on, is that you can align with them. You can sell your soul to the devil to align with them all day long, but at the end of the day, you're still not one of them. You're the first to go when you look at like the gulags.
You're going to get discarded. Okay, so it's going to go bad for the vast majority of you. You need to start making some plans if you're a striver listening to this, and you need to strive to save your own neck from what you're actually helping to bring about.
So when it comes to the Republican politicians, having the conversations with them that says, you're doing this, you're choosing to align with Glenn Youngkin, okay, this is what's going to happen. And I use the comprehensive sexuality education example. You won't talk about SEL because it furthers it. So you're okay with the hypersexualization. You're okay with it being the vehicle for critical race theory. You're okay with this because it's furthering the workforce agenda for Glenn Youngkin. So you're not going to talk about it. I want to show them the example of like, so you have a daughter. Okay. So 11-year-old daughter pulled up in front of a class who then has to role play in front of 30 other children, oral sex consent with another girl. Same thing with a boy, because it's coming in through social emotional learning. So you're okay with that. You're okay with that part, because the brainwashing, the destruction of your child's brain through social emotional learning, the engineering of it without you seem to be okay with that. How about your son having to role play consent with another boy for anal sex? Are you okay with that? You are? Oh, okay. Because that wouldn't shock me either.
Ringleaders aren't going to stop. They're all in. They can only double down. They can only therefore be exposed and discredited so that the strivers and the normies will drop them, and the doubters will realize this matters and start to stand up and rebel, and the rebels will feel like they're making progress and stay encouraged. So that's a map to how to fight back. I know these are supposed to be short. This is 30 minutes. Deal with it. I think that this is a profound way to think about how movements work and how people relate to movements. And you need to locate yourself within this. And if you heard what needs to happen for everybody, if you're already a rebel, you know what your strategies are. Discredit the ringleaders, convince the strivers that they're operating in a bad deal, wake up normies, embolden doubters, support one another, box out potential rival ringleaders out of your movement. These are the things that you must be doing, and you must be doing constantly. And with kind of vision of what you can do, I think you can feel more encouraged and more certain about how to proceed. I think that this is a very reliable map for dealing with these circumstances. I've already just in the past few days been poking around, thinking about employing it, and I'm finding that I feel a lot more successful. So I hope you'll take it to heart and give it a try.
So his bullet points are kind of like where he is then going to a launch off point. So, you know, I'm sure more is going to come from this. But let's get into discourses. So if you guys, I highly encourage you to follow James. Let's go playlist. So the Marxification and education, this one. So anything with this background right here. So there's 3 videos and 4 videos. So this would be an entire weekend up in Crystal City. Wait, no, this isn't the same background. This is the one that we sponsored. I had to think about it because it's the same background.
I wish I was going to start.
So, he got social emotional learning, groomer schools, Paulo Freire, and the critical turn in education. I would say this is really important. I would watch this Paulo Freire, groomer schools, if you want to understand like how the hypersexualization is working.
I wish I was going to start this off with like lots of humor other than that weird joke I just made.
But he's like, it was awesome. It was only like 40 of us and it was a whole weekend. But if you didn't know anything about Paulo Freire or like Hegel or any of that, you would have been lost. But he's got it broken like groomer schools. There's like 4. But so, and I pay we pay $6 a month because he does one only subs, and it's for only subscribers, and it's great. It's definitely worth it, because they're like little short ones, that are so important. Like they're just great. Like I can't do this anymore. Like when you want to give up and stuff like that. But if you don't want to pay $6, don't pay $6 because there's still amazing information on here. But he has guests come on like Peter Boghossian, if you don't know who he is. But he talks a lot about the stuff that I talk about, like Mao. This came out a couple hours ago, 2 days ago. Sorry. And he goes. The NEA goes sustainable. I think I did one called what do the NEA and Glenn Youngkin have in common? Like, and but like I wouldn't get into like Gnosticism. If you know about Klaus Schwab and the Great Reset, stakeholder capitalism is a great one. But I would look for ones like what is SEL? Can we trust social emotional learning? No, absolutely not. Let's see. And then the dark truth about social emotional learning. Now it's 4 hours long. People were appalled when I suggested listening to it, but break it apart. Do you care enough to learn? And then once you understand, I would say, there's a social emotional learning. You'll hear enough information that you understand that I would then start to venture into Paulo Freire, because understanding Paulo Freire is critical, not to make a joke. But then you can get into the theology of like Marxism, but there is a way, but groomer schools is definitely extremely important. There's 4 of them. But so he has a website too where he breaks down like essays, but I would definitely order the book, The Marxification of Education, which came from this that we proudly sponsored last year. So the bullets are great too if you can't digest like the SEL cycle is really great because it talks about like, so you have SEL, it's filtered through the lens is always going to produce, I call it the self-looking lollipop. It's always going to produce what you want. So the data, which you don't know how the data got filtered, is always going to say that the kids are, mentally ill. They need more social emotional learning. And then that's the never ending cycle of SEL, which is where we are now. Fighting DEI training, struggle sessions, Darbo, there it is. So that would be under those of you that like the Darbo thing, that's under his bullets. Anti-communist education, extremely important, because that would be, he mentions Virginia, the power of opting out. Think about it. I've used this one before. 1 in 7 people said no to the vaccine, which isn't a lot of people, but the power of that opt-out of the 1 in 7 of us that said no is why we're not living under vaccine passports right now, because that 1 in 7 was that crucial. And so think about if 1 in 7 parents actually did the opt-outs forcefully using the law that I continuously talk about, what that would do to the system of education. When to stand up now. This is the one with G. Van Vliet. And so the bullets are great if you can't, but queer theory, and then maybe once you get into a little bit more of the after the bullet points. DEI explained, just start there at the bullets. But like I said, is that there are those of us, myself, that are rebels and will be rebels until the day that we die. And we will go down in a big flaming ball of glory, because truth is truth. There is no such thing as my truth or your truth. It is the truth. But is that the only way that we're going to win, there's not enough of us, is that those of you that are awake, but just haven't quite gotten to the point to where you will speak out. I cannot emphasize enough that we are at the time where the choice. Now, you don't have to be me on a show or me in everybody's face all day long. That's not what I'm saying about speaking out. I'm talking about going to a school board meeting. I'm talking about saying, what can I do to help Virginians for Children's First? Because you're doing something that nobody else in the state's doing, which is crossing the aisles and speaking the truth, which is the only way that we save these children. What skills do you have? What skill set can you, because I'm overwhelmed. We're overwhelmed. Kimberly, Bobby, we're overwhelmed. Is the time, and there will be, is that it is that vital, is that we need your help. The rebellion, the resistance, whatever you want to call it, in another state, there's a group operating independently, not being funded by anybody, speaking truth, that needs your help. But is that no matter what stage you work out of, is or start your own, which is what I did, because I found that nobody was talking about what actually needed to be, is find a partner. Bobby and I teamed up, two of us, and we've become the wrecking ball of two, has now become three, because we have Kimberly and we have people like that help us across the state, but that are not officially Virginians for Children's First. And there is now three. There was two. And so, but we can, everybody start your own. I would not conform to anybody's because they weren't doing what I knew needed to be done. Start your own. We are at that point, and I cannot say this enough, to where our children will have no future. America will have no future. And so if you know somebody who is a normie, or, if you are a doubter, or if you are a rebel and know a doubter, carry this message. Take Darvo to somebody, explain to them, when you speak up and you get shut down, this is what's happening, so that the next time they will have less fear to speak up. And then they will become to where you can go up and you can go to battle with anybody, but you have to get educated too. But when you become in your stance, and you're based, meaning nobody can knock you down. And I don't have fear. And it's not arrogance. It's not that I think I know everything. It's that I'm so firm in my belief and my knowledge of what this is going to do, that I will fight it, anybody, and not back down ever. And so knowledge is everything. So if you're not one to come forward, you can be a rebel and become so educated that you educate other people. That's how you can also become a rebel. So I just made this right before the shirt. So if anybody wants a basis book, my husband's like, I just make sure it's like when I need one, like my body, my billboard is kind of my motto. I go everywhere with a different shirt on. So that's that. Go back and listen. Let me see. I'll post the link for you. So this, no. Is this it? Yes. So I'm going to post the actual James Lindsay link that we just listened to. You can go back But like I said, go to New Discourses. He also has a podcast you can do on Apple. All of his links are, I think, in here. Let's see. Yeah, but he's got, I mean, he's got a website. He's got essays that he writes, his books. Yeah, he's got Spotify, Apple, Reddit, Minds, Patreon, Twitter, New Discord, Facebook, Instagram. He's everywhere, literally everywhere. Look, oh, sorry. So here. So if you don't believe in Apple, then you can do Meebee. You can do Instagram. You can do Facebook. You can Telegram. You can do... So, and I'm not saying that he's the only person that you need to be listening to, because education isn't really, Marxification in education isn't really, it was the first time he had ever like encroached that. So when he talks about it, he's talking about it from like a huge, like I'm thinking at it strictly as education, because I don't talk voter machines. I don't talk, you know, because that's not my thing. I go to my people where that's their thing when I need to talk about that. So he talks about it in like a huge, like global, like when he's talking about ESG, like he's talking about like the climate takeover. Like I'm thinking of it as how SDG applies to SEL, because all I do is education all day long. But you know, you'll find great people that he interacts with and talks with, and then you can, you know, find out information. But there's so much information. I'm good at what I do when it comes to like digging down into the wormhole. But when it comes to like the actual information, like the surface information that you need to know as a parent to fight this, it's really not that hard to find. What you may have trouble finding is the connection between, it's actually not if you know what's going on, but how it's both sides of the aisles. So if you understand the woke side, start questioning the right and why nobody is actively fighting it the way that it should be fought. And start asking the questions. Find out if people are feckless that are running for office, or if they're clueless. And if they're clueless, give them a chance, educate them. Do you know what this is? Do you know what this bill that you voted in did? Because then if they were clueless, you give them the chance to then determine if they're feckless or corrupt, or if they're actually going to do something different. Start asking the questions. Do you know what this means? Do you know what evidence-based means? Do you know what the science of reading is? Or did it just sound good? But start asking the questions, and don't be afraid to. Go to where your people are running and walk up to them and be like, hey, do you know what this is? I saw this on your page. Do you know what 21st century skills are? See what their answer is. Like, they work for you. Don't forget that. They work for you. They don't work for Glenn Youngkin. They don't work for Jason Miyares. You elect them. They work for you. So on that note, going to go see if my kids are even still awake. But again, diddle thing is a little bit different tonight. But I hope you guys got an understanding. And maybe I will work on putting some more Darvo stuff together so that you guys will have the courage to come forward if you know what's going to come back at you, and therefore you can already set up your ping pong to pong it back to them.